it was a stretch when people were saying, well, the athletes aren't responsive. They don't get involved with social situations, okay? They're not like you guys used to do. Well, what most folks didn't realize or didn't take into consideration was in the 50s, in the 60s, the athletes, the black athlete at that particular time was living in situations, not hearing about them, living in them. So every time my father drove down south and he got called all kind of names just for every time he stopped for gas, every time he did this, went someplace down south, the cops were stopping him, and we were just living it and watching this abuse and all kind of stuff that was happening. The name calling, trying to get some food at a counter, Woolworth counter, and people saying, hey, get out of here, and people gathering. So you lived it. So therefore, when you had a chance to get in this kind of platform, you had something to say, okay? Because you were in the midst of it. Trying to go to schools that they don't want any parts of you. The first few black players that were trying to get in the NBA, middle 50s or 52, around that time, I knew the guy. I had met two of them, okay? They had come through New York trying to play. I was a kid then, not that far behind. I was only about 8, 9 years behind, let's say, Earl Lloyd and Chuck Hooper and those kind of guys, okay? But the issue was they were having problems, but the NBA opened the door and they came in, one with the Celtics and one with Detroit, okay? So things were beginning to change, but we were living it. Bill Russell had some problems that he lived with coming out of Louisiana, okay? One of the worst things that I experienced was watching the news about Emmett Till, a young man who was lynched in Mississippi, okay, 14 years old, okay? I mean, things were happening. We had plenty to talk about and plenty to be angry about, okay? And that's one of the reasons you look at Ali, Jim Brown, Bill Russell, look at all the other athletes that got around, along with Martin Luther King and some of the other leaders. They had stuff to say because they were living it. Fast forward, a lot of the athletes that came before you particularly didn't have that era of problems. They were able to go to a lot of the schools. They had dollars that they could spend. They could do things if they could afford to. They could go places because a lot of things had been legislated out of America in terms of problems with race and et cetera. They were just under wraps, okay? Last few years, all of a sudden, stuff started happening, either police brutality or hearing all kind of name calling, coming back in. You watch the disrespect that a guy like Obama went through, and all of a sudden, the players are living through different situations. They've got stuff to say now, okay? For LeBron, for anyone who wants to use the platform, use it. Feel free to do so. But for about 20, 30 years, no one was stepping up, or very few players were stepping up because there was no problem. Now there are problems.
You know what made the difference?
Yeah.
Technology.
Technology did open some doors, no question.
Opened a lot of doors.
Yes.
You see everything. You see police brutality. You see all these different things that happen at a click of a screen. So now people can get together within seconds. That's such a powerful tool. It almost makes me wonder if social media was around during some of those times in the 60s, the 70s with Dr. King, the Civil Rights Movement. How different could that have been?
If technology was where it is now, back then, I think you would have had more of the city riots, perhaps. You would have had some more violent reactions from a lot of people rather than just from individuals going through their experiences. I think the medium certainly has changed quite a bit. But the name of the game were personal experiences. The reason why those players at that particular time involved with personal experiences, that's why it exploded in terms of conversation and how they handle themselves. It wasn't hearsay. When you sat down with your grandfather and he told you, well, this is what I went through. Okay? When you sat down with your father and your mother and they tell you what they went through, and you can see what they're going through because every once again you experience it. It's a whole different ballgame. When the Celtics when we tried to go on a tour down in the Carolinas in '62, I think it was, and couldn't stay in hotels. Hey, that was right up front in your face. So it wasn't a matter of we didn't have the technology, that was happening to you personally, not just seeing that it could happen to someone else or did happen to someone else. And that caused the reaction and the experience level of conversation. Right. But everyone cannot and should not get up on the platform and start talking about it. Some can, because they make sure they're aware enough and they can talk about it. Others, going through similar kinds of experiences, may find other ways to deal with it. They may start a charity, okay? They may take their personal income or get involved in programs that are fighting against certain things, gender violence or trying to help women get better rights, trying to help black kids get into situations with schooling, all kinds of things. There are many directions you can go. And the thing is, nowadays, of course, a lot of the athletes are relatively well paid, so they're able to get personally involved themselves with money and get other people involved. So not only do they have the stage, in many cases, they have some dollars to throw at some of the problems. I can tell you now, the average salary when I was talking about in the 50s and 60s, the average salary was like $12,000, $14,000 a year for the ball players. We used to talk about how wonderful it would be if we could ever make $20,000 a year. Wow, we sat around talking about that. I'd be set for life, man, $20,000 a year. And so you can see that worlds of difference. The experience might be similar, a reaction to the experiences is similar, but the stage is different.